Now, Michigan Reimagined with Chris Buck.
So it's difficult to go a week these days without hearing about a new small business fall victim to cybercrime, and I'm told that many don't go reported. Here to discuss how outsourced IT firms are helping protect businesses large and small from the hackers and ransomware criminals is the Chief Information Security Officer for Dewpoint, Mr. Don Cornish. Welcome to the show, Don.
Hey, Chris. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
So tell us a little bit about Dewpoint as a company. You know, who are you? What do you generally do?
Okay, so Dewpoint is it's a Michigan-based IT company headquartered up there in Lansing. We've been around since about 1996, and we provide a number of services and capabilities out to small, medium businesses, our target audience for it, as well as with the state, local government education area, so the SLED area as well for it. As I said, we've been in the Lansing area for now since 96 for it. We've got about 250 professionals covering a wide range of different services. Just to give your listeners an idea of what we do for it, we've got some different categories like portfolio project management for it. We do, of course, the security services area, which is what I'm responsible for. We have another line of business in infrastructure services where we do managed services for various clients running their IT environment for them. We also have an arm that looks at application development and application services for it. And the final area is in the agile area, which is gaining traction and interest out there as a means of accelerating development for different projects, bringing them to market, bringing them to fruition at a faster rate. So we're quite broadly scoped and capabilities from the staff that are on board.
No kidding. Wow, you really touched a lot of bases there. It seems like it's a very comprehensive company. 250 employees here in Lansing, which is phenomenal. I didn't realize that you had that kind of an employee base, but with all of those services that you provide and then that kind of portfolio of clients, it seems like you need that kind of group to get the job done.
That's exactly right.
So as the Chief Information Security Officer, you kind of alluded to it, but what exactly is your role?
Okay, so from my role within Dewpoint is I sort of wear two hats. One is accountable for the security posture within Dewpoint as a company, from an IT perspective for it, as well as providing oversight for some of our clients that don't have the maturity or the size to be able to justify having their own Chief Information Security Officer on staff. So I provide that oversight and that guidance both internally within the company as well as to, as I say, our delivery organisation as supporting our client base for it. So with that, that and what comes into that is things like looking at their IT security policies, if they have them, are they appropriate? Looking at things like security practices, do they have those in place? How well are they running them? Education across the whole workforce, because as we'll get into that a little bit later, educating your workforce is key to trying to enhance and maintain your security posture. So it's a pretty wide-ranging role. Challenging at times, like all action or activities in IT are for it. But the overall objective is actually trying to manage risk within an organisation. There's a common saying out there that, in the security space nowadays, it's not a matter of if I'm going to be compromised, it's a matter of when. So my role is to help organizations be better prepared for the when from that perspective.
Right. So if I were a small business and I became a new client of yours, what's the process for Dewpoint to assess, kind of where I am today? Because I'm sure that is the starting point. So what does your team do to kind of confirm what my risk is, as I enter into a relationship with your company?
So, and that's a great lead-in for us there, Chris, because that is exactly what we have to do, is come in and work with the client to do an assessment. We do a number of assessments, not just in the security space, but in the infrastructure space, their application space, because that becomes the foundation for us to be able to meet the the client's requirements and be able to take them up to the next level of where we believe they is appropriate for their size organisation, the type of business they're in, etc. So what we tend to do is we have a number of questionnaires that we will share with the client, get them to fill out, and then we usually go through a face-to-face interview regime where we'll interview stakeholders within the company, and that's from the owners for a lot of the small mediums for it. We actually are fortunate enough to be able to have discussions with the owners and their leadership team, and then we also go down and we talk to the folk that are doing the work day to day to get an understanding of their view of how things are being done, the level of maturity. We look at, hey, what's working well, what's not working well for it, and then provide to the organisations a report and a roadmap as to how we believe they could enhance their security posture or their infrastructure, depending on what area it is that they've engaged us with. But the methodology is very consistent that we use within Dewpoint. It's been developed over a number of years, and it's delivered us and supported us very well.
Are you willing to give any free advice? Is there any kind of top 2 or top 5 or top 10, things that are just common that people aren't doing that they should be doing?
Yeah, certainly. For the listeners out there, I guess that my approach to security for small, medium businesses, don't make it overly complicated. You don't have to have every shiny bell and whistle tool that's out there in the marketplace. Those of you that have looked at it, you'll find there's a plethora of different tools out there. They all claim to be able to do everything, etc. Unfortunately, reality is that's not the case. So my approach and my direction to folks sort of starting out on this journey is do the basics well. And to me, what the basics mean is, first of all, you've got to know what's important in your business. So identify what are the critical assets, the critical data that you need to protect. And it might be intellectual property. It may be that you're in a regulated area and you have things like PCI, payment card data, if you're doing transactions on that. Or it may be that, you have a government contract, and the government contract says that the information you're dealing with is federally classified, or it could be CUI data, which is getting a whole lot of attention now through the Department of Defense and their CMMC program for it, and you need to protect those. So the first thing is identify what you need to protect, then where is it in your organisation, and then you can start looking at, okay, how do I do it? And from an operational perspective, there's some real basic fundamentals that I believe all organisations need to do, and those are things like, do your patching. Patching of systems is still one of the major areas where an organisation or the malicious actors actually compromise organisations. The other part of it is around identity and access management. Make sure that you control the privileged accounts in your environment. And what I mean by that is to manage the IT environment on a system basis, you'll have some accounts that need to have more capabilities than others, and that's what we call privileged accounts. Manage those very tightly. Don't give people more than they need to do to be able to do their job from an access and capability perspective for it. So tie those down. So if you go down that path for it, you're going to give yourself, put yourself in a good stead, because most organisations today are getting compromised through things like phishing attempts. So, you get an email, it says click on this link. People aren't thinking. They click on the link. Before they know it, there's some malicious codes being downloaded to their system for it. And the malicious actors are very skilled at basically writing code that can go through your system, looking for accounts, looking for how your infrastructure is set up and that sort of thing. So if they gather and are able to compromise your privileged accounts, then that gives them the ability to walk their way through your system and take whatever they want and compromise your environment. So, identity and access management, being able to differentiate individual accounts from privileged accounts is some of the main things. And to go hand in hand with that, of course, is, educate your staff. Make sure your staff are educated. And one of the things that I like to try and stress to people is, I don't know too many people today that don't have some sort of IT infrastructure at home, whether it be a cell phone, because if you think about it, a cell phone is basically a mini computer.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So they got a cell phone, they got a tablet, their kids have got computers, particularly within the pandemic. How many kids now have come home with a laptop because that's the way they've had to work remotely? So if you educate your staff at work, pretty much everything that you are educating them on from an IT perspective is translatable back to home for it. And so they should be practicing those IT hygiene practices, not just at work and forget about it, but take it home, educate the rest of the family, because it's going to help protect their personal environment as well as the work environment. So they're just some of the things that, I tend to focus on when we start having discussions with people. And they're not hard to do. They take a bit of thought, but most organizations should be able to put those in place pretty quickly.
Well, I appreciate that. You shared a lot, and I think that there's a couple of questions I want to spin off from that. One is, you mentioned, your home infrastructure. So as we record this, hopefully late pandemic, not mid-pandemic, the whole work from home concept has been almost a year-long thing now. Has that complicated your work? The whole home infrastructure that really isn't managed by the employer. What kind of measures is that, do they need to take, and how has that changed your world?
Well, so you're 100% right there. In the pre-pandemic world, where most people were working in an office, the way it was thought of from a protection security perspective was I lock up what we call a hard shell outside, and even that concept is somewhat changing. But the original concept was I have a hard shell out there that I protect, and basically you only have a limited known number of entry points into the organization. And they're protected through things like, technologies like firewalls and IDS, which is incident detection, and IPS, which is a prevention system. You have filters on there. You have proxy servers, which basically can restrict how the data flows in and out of the organization, etc. So that was all in the pre-pandemic world for it. So people were in the office inside this relatively tightly controlled environment. Now, in the pandemic, everybody's remote from home. So how do I get to work? How do I do my job for it? I probably may have a work computer. I may have a private computer that it'll turn on. I have my own ISP, and somehow I connect out to the internet, and then I come into the work environment. Some work environments will force people to go in through what they call VPNs, virtual private networks, which are controlled, so the organization is able to see more of what's going on from the home users' perspective into their environment and put those controls that normally in the office, they put them back in place. A lot of organizations have moved to the cloud for it. So now, instead of having all their data on-prem or in their own data center, it could be up on a cloud provider. That also brings challenges with it. So, the pandemic has definitely turned the security challenge, expanded that considerably, and it's turned the whole paradigm on its head to a degree.
Well, I've discussed this topic a number of times pre-pandemic, and the statistics and the scary stories are really, truly frightening. And you mentioned very casually, it's not a matter of if, but when you're going to get breached as an organization. Have the bad guys been very opportunistic during this work from home? Did they see an opportunity and exploit it, or has it been the normal craziness out there?
No, I would say they are opportunistic. They definitely have upped their game in certain areas. From a security landscape standpoint, they have definitely been targeting areas around the COVID vaccine research. So what we're finding is a lot of medical research organizations, the universities, those sort of organizations have become very much in the forefront of the attackers' line of sight, trying to compromise and get into those organizations. So they've definitely been on the leading edge of being victims victims of various hacks and compromises. That said, though, small, medium organisations are still equally as vulnerable and part of the attack surface from a malicious actor perspective. Because the thing that people need to realise with these malicious actors is that they run it as a business, Chris. It's not a hobby anymore. That people think of the hacker, the kid in his hoodie down in the basement and what have you. Those days, they still exist, but they're definitely a thing of the past. But the malicious actors now are very much well-funded, highly skilled in what they do, and they target their markets very carefully because the way they run it as a business, and they look at what can I get for the greatest, how do I get the greatest return for the least amount of effort. So if you make it easy for them to get in, and just because you're small doesn't mean to say they're not going to target you, because I'm sure a lot of our listeners have seen in the press the ransomware attacks that take place. And now, when ransomware first started, it was basically I get in your files and they demand a ransom for you to give you the keys to unencrypt it. Now, the current phase of that is, I get in, but before I actually do any encryption, I actually exfiltrate your files, and then I encrypt them, and then I demand a ransom. And if you don't pay the ransom, now what I do is I come out and I say, well, I've got your files. I'm going to now publish them out in the public internet or in the dark web for it. And so, they've basically got you over a barrel two ways. If you don't pay the money, you get your private information becomes public. So that's sort of the way things have developed in the security space during the pandemic space.
Unbelievable. Well, unfortunately, we're out of time, but I've really enjoyed the conversation. We've been speaking to the Chief Information Security Officer for Dewpoint, Don Cornish. Don, remind the world how to get in touch with Dewpoint.
Yeah, so if people are interested in getting in touch with Dewpoint, please go to our website. It's www.dewpoint.com, and there you'll see the service offerings, the phone number, and a email address that they can connect with us and ask any questions. We can more than happy to help them.
Well, we appreciate your work out there in the world. Thanks for joining me, Don.
Thanks, Chris.